Hey, Greg, real quick, I think when the breakout rooms close, we might have lost your presentation. Can you reshare your screen?
Sorry, guys. Now, are you guys seeing it?
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So student statuses are program reviews. Return to Title IV calculation. Enter and exit deficiencies. Verification. And the big one, consumer information not met. SAP not politically followed. Student credit balances. Lack of administrative capability. Counting records not reconciled. And Clarity Act not being met. So what are the top findings between both of those? It's very key. So when an auditor comes out, these are probably on their list. Or when a program review comes in, these are going to be on their list, what they're finding. Why do we ask? These are the most scrutined areas that the department has or auditor can find, the most complex areas. There's a little bit of gray area inside of some of those findings. What are they? They are the return on Title IV calculation. Student status is incorrect or NSLDS. Verification violations. Student deficiencies on your credit balances. Your accounting records not reconciling. Your enter and exit is not being done correctly. So let's talk about one of the findings we talked about early on. One of the top compliance findings is repeat findings from year to year to year. The department is implementing, you're looking at your corrective action plans that you give it and you submit back to the department when they review that. And they're saying that you tweaked, you provided training to your students, to your employees. So they're saying, where is the effectiveness on this? Why is it still happening? Why is that repeat finding not being caught? Is there a gap? Is there a difference? Are we not finding the crack in the process or procedure? So look at your internal controls. I challenge you again to say, are my controls good enough for these repeat findings to be not occurring? So what can we be doing? So an example, repeat for untimely return of funds. Develop and implement a cap and schedule to monitor or develop an RTT4 report that you can be monitoring on maybe every 2 weeks to ensure that the credit Title IV refunds are being returned within the required 45 days and they are accurately being returned. So we want to make sure that somebody is monitoring that. It could be a first thing on every other Friday, be looking at that to ensure that we have that. But we need to make sure the spreadsheet includes proper information, LDA, DOD, when were the funds returned back to the Department of Education? We say returned. That means when the funds were available in our federal funds account, we notified the department that the funds were there. That's when the funds were technically returned. So making sure we have all that. And we also have what happens. Sometimes it gets close to that 45 days and we tell the business office, it's okay. We need to make sure there's urgent processes in place to, if it's on the verge of being late, if it's the 40th day or the 42nd day, that this is top priority. It needs to take to the top of their list, not on the bottom of their stack of their workload for that day. So we need to be defining that. So review your cap, challenge your cap. Are we doing these things that we say we're doing? Is it working? Try to penetrate it. Try to say, is there a crack that we could find in it? Or no, there is no loopholes. And be honest with ourselves. Like I was earlier, my golf swing, I tweaked it a little bit and I gained those extra yards. Change to improve the process. Share the cap with your accounting department so that they know what your process is, so they know the importance of it when it comes to them late. And now it's more of a school audit, not a compliance audit. So everybody is held accountable. Perform reviews during the year to ensure that this is doing. periodically look. And if you need to, hold people accountable that we're assigning to these different areas and check back in with them. And then always, if new regulations that we've seen in July change, making sure that we are providing that additional training throughout the year and for attending some of these sessions. The next one we see a lot is NSLDS not being reported incorrectly or untimely reporting. So failing to report the last day of attendance, the change in the student status, they go from half-time to three-quarter times during that term, it's not being reported correctly, or inaccurate program level data, or they were not reported at all. So we want to ensure that when they drop, it's getting updated using the LDA, not the date of determination. So when we're updating NSLDS. Another example we have, failing to report the rosters in a timely manner. There's no policy or procedures for updating the rosters. So when we get those air rosters back, there's nothing happening. Develop a process or procedure for submitting the rosters. Train your staff for reporting the requirements and the processes. Make sure everybody knows the start and the end of the process and why it's important to do these things in a timely manner and make sure that we have that. So we can review, we can update, we can verify student statuses, the effective date of the enrollment agreement, and the completion date. Maintain these enrollment records for a period of time. Try to auto or electronically the batch uploads or individually online updates for some of these late drops. Make sure that they're timely. Update more frequently. Even know that you're on a 60-day schedule. The Department of Education does not say that you cannot report even more frequently to catch some of these, I would call, cracks in our policies, because they may not be in that next cycle. Maybe you have to report them earlier, and that is fine. If we have new people in the Department of NSLDS, making sure that they understand the ins and outs of it, and also providing refresher training, providing understanding of the nuances of it, and getting the deadlines. Make sure it's clear and understood the deadlines of reporting, and making sure that COD, when we're doing that, is accurately, data is uploaded. So the big one, the one that the department always finds in all their program reviews, and even auditors find, is errors on the calculation. Incorrect number of days using the term. The actual clock hours instead of scheduled hours. The incorrect aid was used in the wrong bucket. What I mean by bucket is could have been dispersed or dispersed. An incorrect withdraw date. Two systems that we have for attendance, they don't line up. The incorrect post-withdrawal disbursement. There is no policy or incorrect return on Title IV policy. And this one, a mathematical error because we're still doing it manually. Or we made our own spreadsheet in Excel, and now we're rounding out too far instead of going out just 4 decimal places. So incorrect calculation due to using the incorrect number of days in the term or payment period. Work with your register to review accurate information regardless of enrollment period, including weekends. Being sure to exclude all breaks of more than 5 days. So sometimes we will have breaks that we see that weren't unexpected, that we had to close. And we all were aware of that during the pandemic. So those breaks now might have been 0. Now they're becoming 5 or even longer. So we need to make sure we're updating that calendar to making sure that everybody that's doing the calculation understands that and they know the importance of it. So review the regulations. We all know July 1st came and went. There was new regulations on the return on Title IV process for modular base. We want to be making sure we're up to that. Creating scheduled hours, break charts for our people that are doing the return on Title IV, and making sure that they're updated when things happen. Verifying the withdrawal and the date of determination with other supporting documentation that we utilize, change of status forms, the attendance, in our systems, our the LMS systems, providing correct information to the third-party servicer, if a third-party servicer is doing it, and to the business office to ensure that the return on Title IV is doing the proper thing. So they know the importance of that, evaluating and trying to say, is there any flaws in my procedures or my processes? Performing self-reviews of your return on Title IVs, calculations. Maybe we have a new team member, or maybe we even have an experienced team member, periodically reviewing some of those files and giving positive and constructive feedback to them. What happened and where was there an error? Where did we misunderstand this error? And always throughout the year, we want to be providing training to our staff about all the new regulations the department keeps on rolling out for us now. The next one, late return to Title IV. Returning Title IV funds, the calculation has to be done within 30 days. However, the funds need to be done within 45 days. Making sure that every party that's involved knows their responsibility. That if there's an urgency that they need to know, it has to be done within this time period. It has to be out. School has a stricter policy. Sometimes we see in catalogs, we say refunds are done within 30 days. So now you're holding yourself to a higher standard. If that's out there, you would really want to watch to do that, because now you're holding yourself to that standard. There's no mechanism to track your refunds. You don't have anything. You just think your system's going to track it. There should be something, other mechanism that you're verifying that these funds were going out. They're done. And you're not calculating the number of days that they went out. How long is it? What is the turnaround process? Why is it taking us 42 days to do this right here? Why are when I give it to the business office, why is it only like 5 days? I understand we're all busy and we have these things, but knowing, letting everybody know, painting the picture of why the importance of this right here. We all know if we have more than 2 late refunds in a program review or an audit, that can mean a letter of credit. And nobody wants to go to their president or their board and say, we have to post a letter of credit of 25% of all refunds that could have been or should have been made during the year. Nobody wants to have that tough conversation. So right here, return of Title IV is not made within the required time frame of the 45 days. Develop and implement a process to calculate the return of these funds or to the appropriate and timely, the 45-day regulation. So develop a tracking mechanism to track the student that dropped, when their LDA was, when their DOD, when would the funds return back to the department. And what happens? We all know. Sometimes the department G5 goes down. And now I uploaded it and they couldn't do it. I might have had to write a check. So always have a process just in case we need to go back to the old days and write checks. So we want to make sure that we have that also for just the what if situation. And we want to evaluate and be reviewing throughout the year. What are our processes? How are these people doing? Are we doing it well? Are we getting close to that 45 days? Are we on the 44th day? If that's the case, we may want to reevaluate our process. Develop, evaluate the officials and unofficial withdrawals to make sure that we're picking those up in that timely manner. And always, like I say enough, training. Provide the training to your departments on the regulations and why the importance of this. And what are the ramifications? What is the risk if we don't do it? If people understand the risk, they're going to understand the importance of it, because now all of a sudden we know having a tough conversation with our president and our board would be tough to have a letter of credit. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to talk about some of the verification process.
Thank you, Greg. So I just want to stop here. I didn't see any questions that came in on the chat, but if anybody has any questions about anything that Greg covered, repeat findings, inaccurate reporting, R2T for calculation errors or late returns. If anyone has a question, you can unmute yourself if you like and ask a question. I'll give you a couple seconds if you want to do that. Okay, if there's no questions, then we're going to move forward and talk about verification violations that are found in audits and program reviews. And a lot of that stems from the missing or incomplete documentation. You could have inefficient verification policies. So you're missing things, within the verification process, interim disbursement rules that aren't being followed, and conflicting data that's not resolved. So information that's maybe different on the tax return from the ICER or in your verification worksheet. An example of this would be conflicting information that was reported, like I said, on the verification worksheet that didn't match the ICER, institutional student information record. And that wasn't resolved before you completed verification and you went ahead and dispersed funds to the student. So what you want to do in that situation is develop and implement procedures so that you're resolving all of that conflicting information prior to moving forward with verification, and make sure that you're submitting those corrections on the ICER so that you can complete the verification process before you're dispersing any funds. Some additional solutions that you can look at is to develop an appropriate verification procedure so that you can ensure that submissions are being done timely and all the required documents are in there. You can create a verification checklist that goes through your process, or sometimes, I think the common thing here is to self-audit within your office. So create a process where you're monitoring the verification process. Maybe someone's doing it and someone is doing a second look or a check on it. This way you can make sure that, you're resolving all conflicting information. You can do this on, a monthly basis. You can do it, weekly, quarterly, depending on how many verifications you have in your office. I know that verification has gotten a lot simpler recently, but I think it's still a good idea to have this, self-audit monitoring process within your office, especially with all these rules and regulations that change all the time, and we never know what's going to come around the corner. So it's good to keep checks and balances in place so that you're making sure that everything's being done correctly, and review the application and verification guide in the Federal Student Aid Handbook. That's always a good way to get a process started or to get your checklist started. The next thing that auditors see and program reviewers see is the Pell Grant overpayment or underpayment. And that's using an incorrect Pell formula. That can happen that way. You're doing inaccurate calculations, prorations, using the wrong EFC. Maybe you're using the incorrect number of weeks or hours in your calculation. And then a lot of times these things happen when there's a change in enrollment status and you're not notified. So, something happens, the student drops from full-time to half-time, your office doesn't get notified, you've already paid Pell and you didn't get a chance to change it. So that's what our example was about. The student changed their enrollment status between terms from full-time to half-time, and that resulted in an overpayment. So a way that you can resolve that is to establish a set of internal controls and procedures so that you verify the enrollment status prior to dispersing any aid and adjust the aid accordingly, and also have a process for resolving those over and under payments. Some additional solutions would be to establish in your policies and procedures to strengthen that awarding process. Use your system to document the Pell Award. So when you awarded it, the scheduled award, maybe the Pell formula that you used, documenting the enrollment status at the time that you made the award, taking consideration any transfer credits and prorating when it's needed. And then, again, signing that responsibility for monitoring. So, having a second check, when the awards are made to make sure that the disbursements are accurate and timely, doing those random file reviews and making sure that your staff is understanding the process and providing training to them when it's needed. I think in all of these common findings between auditors and program reviews, having that, second check, having you make that check before they find it is always a better thing, for your office. So making sure that you're doing those random file reviews in all of these instances. Next, we're going to talk about student credit balance deficiencies. So a lot of times we'll find that the credit balance was not released within 14 days. There was no process in place to determine when that credit balance was created. There are cases where the credit balance is held without a student authorization, and the authorization was, that was put into place wasn't compliant. So it did not explain, what funds were covered. It maybe didn't clearly explain how the student or the parent could cancel or modify that authorization. So you want to make sure that, the authorization that you have in place is a compliant authorization for you to be able to hold those funds. Unclaimed credit balance that aren't returned within, 240 days from the first check. So you want to make sure that you're in compliance with that, and that the credit balances were not released by the end of the loan period or the award year. So you want to make sure that your, credit balances aren't being held after that time. An example of this, of a credit balance that was not paid timely, or the authorization was incorrect or inadequate, a way to resolve that would be to develop and implement procedures or internal controls so that those credit balances can be identified and released timely. And that, like I said before, you want to make sure that your credit balance authorization is in, compliance, making sure that all the right wording is in there. And then again, providing training for your staff. Additional compliance solutions would be to establish internal controls to track the dates associated with the credit balance payments. Periodically reviewing your processes again, having that second check, tracking and monitoring deadlines, ensuring there's timely communication between offices. I think that's a key in a lot of processes. There's a lot of things that we do in the financial aid office require input from the registrar or the student accounts office, sometimes from the academic department. So making sure that those lines of communication are open and that everybody is on the same page when it comes to what needs to be done. Those self audits are key in all of these, program review and audit findings, making sure that, you're checking those credit balance disbursements to make sure that they're timely, that they're not being held after the loan period was over or the award year was over. And just making sure, of course, that authorization, you want to check that, make sure that it has everything it needs in it and doesn't have anything that would, prohibit the student from rescinding it. The another thing that I'm going to talk about, thought it was the last, but it's not. These guys got me for a little bit longer, is entrance and exit counseling deficiencies. So this is when entrance counseling is not conducted for first-time borrowers. You always want to make sure that that entrance counseling is done before you disperse any of those loans. And exit counseling not being done within 30 days of a student's withdrawal or when a student graduates. Exit counseling materials were not mailed for those who didn't complete the exit counseling. And sometimes we'll see errors when exit counseling was completed late. Our example is exit counseling was not completed for an unofficial or mid-year withdrawal. A solution for that would be to develop a procedure to ensure that there's a tracking in place so that withdrawals, when a student withdraws, that exit counseling is sent out to the student. The student is contacted, whether you do it in office or you use studentloans.gov, making sure that the student is getting that information. And, posting links on your school's webpage where a student can go easily to complete that. You always want to make sure that when you're sending out any documentation that it's easy for the student to just, have one click to get where they need to go. We don't want them to jump through hoops to try and find the exit counseling. So always make sure that when you're doing that on your webpage or in a letter, that it's a direct link for the student. Some other solutions would be to assign that responsibility to someone in your office to make that check, to make sure that the entrance and exit counselings are being done when they should be. You can develop procedures to make sure that all offices, like I said before, are on the same page. The registrar the business office, student accounts office, and your financial aid office. Some schools might make exit counseling a requirement for graduation. So when students graduate, there's all these, key things that they have to do before, commencement starts. So making sure that that exit counseling is done for the students who have borrowed federal loans. You can develop your own system to provide that less than half-time or non-attending students get that exit counseling materials within 30 days. And if they, haven't completed it, making sure that you're, emailing them and mailing them, making an attempt to get them to do it, not just once, but, 2 to 3 times. And then, like I said before, including that direct link. You don't want them to have to go to your webpage, to click to another webpage to find what it is that they need. It needs to be simple and direct for the student to get to where they need to do if you're using studentloans.gov, or if they're coming into your office, making sure that they understand exactly what they need to do. Another area that we find, that there's some problems in is that the account records are inadequate or not reconciled correctly. So inaccurate disbursement records would be like a late submission of disbursement records in COD. COD records don't match the ledger cards. So what you said that you dispersed to the student, or the date that you dispersed to the student, doesn't match what you put, what was recorded in COD. There may be inaccurate fiscal records in accounting for funds. So failure to reconcile your Title IV accounts and failure to identify that your bank accounts are Title IV accounts. An example, like I said, was COD records not matching the student account ledgers. And a solution to that is to train your staff on reporting requirements and procedures for COD, including timely reporting, developing periodic reconciliation of the disbursement dates and the amounts. And it's, again, that second check, putting in some kind of system where you're getting that second check to make sure that things are being reported accurately. Some additional compliance solutions would be to develop or enhance your disbursement rules, policies, and procedures. Make sure that you're following your policies, procedures, the things that you say you're doing, that you are actually doing. You should submit or adjust your COD disbursement records timely. If you're on heightened cash monitoring rules, make sure that you're following the guidelines that are set for that. Maintain accurate and complete fiscal records. So reconcile your Title IV accounts monthly. I know sometimes it's easy to say, I'll get to it, but make sure you do get to it, reconcile it, you let it go, and then you can't remember what happened on that second day of the month and how that disbursement went. It's much easier to do it monthly. Make sure that your bank accounts do have the word federal in it. Demonstrate a clear audit trail from your subsidiary to your general ledger accounts. Make sure that that's easily understood. And make sure that your student account statement, and you might have to talk to your student accounts office, but make sure that that's easily understandable, so that you can clearly see when funds were dispersed, when funds were sent back, when a student account balance was paid to the student or returned to the lender. Make sure that that student account statement is easily able to be read by anyone, students, an auditor, whoever. And then drawing down funds and using them immediately. So now Greg is going to finish us out and go through our last audit and program review finding.
So I challenge you guys early. I'm going to challenge you guys again. So we have about 5 minutes, and I want you guys to, what have we picked up on our process and procedures that we're willing to share with the group? So who has my first example?
His girlfriend.
Robin.
Hi,
Thank
Robin.
you.
Well, it's really not, well, it's sort of an example, but a question tied into it as well. Kathy had mentioned about exit counseling, and we do make that a requirement for our students that are graduating. In a nursing school, we have maybe 100 graduates a year. So I go into the classroom, do a exit counseling presentation, and it works well for us. I certainly understand a larger school may not be that easy to do that. But my question is tied into students that withdraw. Are less than half time with that 30-day requirement. Do we have to make sure that they do that within 30 days? I was always thinking, we send the information out, we make that information available to them, and that's all we are obligated to do.
Yes, you're obligated to notify them within 30
Okay.
days.
Okay.
If they don't do it, you would want to make sure that they're receiving it. Make sure you've had the, correct email address or follow-up information for them, because then sometimes they won't receive it if they change address, change phone numbers, however you're
Right.
using. So that's why I said it's best to mail it. Maybe, use snail mail to get it to their address. But somehow making sure that they are getting it.
Okay, because
It's
we
just-
normally mail it once. Would you
Mm-hmm.
recommend, just for auditing purposes, we show that we've attempted another time as well? Or is once enough?
I'm gonna let Greg answer that one.
In-
I would
in-
have a different answer being from a financial aid office. That's
In
fine.
the law, it's only one. But
Yes.
you know what happens when it's only one?
Mhm.
What we want to do is it'd be multiple times to try to get them to do that exit, because we know what happens when they do their exit. They're willing to know their balances and they're trying to pay that back. There's a lot of other things that tie into that to make sure
Right.
that they know what obligations they have. So it's better to do it more than just once. But going back to the nature of the law, it is only one time.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think too, making that extra effort can maybe sometimes help your cohort default rate if they know their rights and responsibilities as a student loan borrower and what's expected of them now that they've left school and need to repay.
mhm. And it also is that opportunity to have a conversation possibly about them coming back as well.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, great,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
So anybody else that maybe they might want to tweak a little bit of one of their procedures that'll make it more efficient or more effective to get rid of some of those cracks in the policies. Who's going to share with one example that they may want to tweak? Come on, we can do it. Just one.
I can share. So when I was in a financial aid office, one thing that we had is when a student withdrawal, there was a form that went around to all the offices that had a stake in what was going on. So it went from our registrar's office, of course, that's where it started, where the student reported, that they wanted to withdraw. And then it went to our student accounts office. It came through to my office, the financial aid office. And my role in that was to make sure that, if the student did have any federal aid, that I was doing the R2T4 calculation, that I was making sure that the, exit counseling was getting sent out. And then once I was done with the form, it went back to our student accounts office so they can make the adjustments to the form. So, having that kind of process spelled out in a form, and that form could be electronic. I know a lot of things have gone electronic now that, with COVID, everybody's been working from home, but it's just a way to make sure that all offices that are involved in that process, that withdrawal of a student, are getting the information they need and, checking off that they've completed their process so you can move on to yours.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And we will move on to presentation. I know it's really difficult because, Kathy and I are both auditors. We don't want to tell the auditors anything that will open us up. And we
I'm sure you
understand-
won't tell us anything we haven't heard.
That is definitely the truth. So I encourage you guys, we want to make you guys a better institution and better schools. So just keep that in mind. So with that said, we're talking about G5, untimely and incorrect reporting. What happened? A disbursement recorded in COD is not done within the 15 days, or the adjustment of the disbursement was not made in COD. The date that's in COD does not match the date that's on the ledger card or the account card. Also, the disbursement amount on the student account card does not match what's in COD. So what do we do? So, fail to report the disbursements recorded in COD within 15 days. How can we fix that? What kind of process do we implement? We're training the staff to make sure they truly understand the process required in including the timeliness of the reporting. We're developing periodic reconciliations of the disbursement dates and the amounts. So we're evaluating, we're analyzing, and we're seeing if we need to make any tweaks to our procedures and policies. So we're developing disbursement rules, making sure that we have them for our policies and procedures, making sure people are aware of them and where they are, and they understand them. It's easy to say that we have X, Y, and Z policy, but nobody knows where they are. Nobody truly understands them. They may be written well, but make sure that we understand what they are and what we're trying to accomplish. Submitting adjustments in COD, make sure that's done timely. Immediately updating COD estimated dates when aid is posted to the student's ledger card. So if it's posted there or estimated, you want to do that. And you can hear the reiteration throughout the whole beginning of the presentation and throughout. Periodically reconciling of disbursements or reviewing to ensure that the dates and the amounts in this situation tie out to what's in both on the student's account card and in COD. So you're going to notice that the department looks at that and pays attention to that during a program review. We want to ensure that you guys are looking at that. And I know it's easy to say that reconciliation and doing these extra steps. What are you all hearing probably in the back of your mind? More time, more time, more time. But guess what? Think about that more time. It's better spent throughout the year than during a program review or during an audit. When you have to go to your president or you have to go to the board and say, we have some major issues here. If we would have spent that little bit of time throughout the year to do these annual reviews, it would be a lot more beneficial to do it throughout the year instead of doing it now when the department says you need to do a full file review for the last 3 award years. Now we're going to say the time constraints. You have to do it in 30 days, plus do all your other work. So just take that in consideration when you're thinking about Kathy and I have been saying, we need to review these periodically. We don't have time, we don't have the manpower. But what about the worst consequences? What if the program reviewer comes in? Or what if an auditor comes in and finds this? There is a deficiency.
Yeah, and I think that, start out small, pick one of your processes that you think you want to do that second check on, get a plan together on how you're going to do that. And once you've, implemented that first one, it's so much easier just to, maybe in a couple months you start another one. So maybe you want to start with verification or, whatever you feel in your office is something that might be a risk to you. Start out with that, put a plan in to do that second review. And you may find that you really like doing that. And you'll find things that are wrong. You'll find ways to correct them. And it just makes all of your processes stronger each time you have a process that you can do a second review on. So if you start with one and maybe next year you implement and start another one, and then before you know it, you've got that kind of quality assurance review for most of your processes in your office. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We can help you with some of those solutions. Does anybody else have any other process that they maybe implemented, started? If you have a second review process that you want to share with everyone to give them ideas on how to get that started, I'm sure everyone would appreciate it. You can unmute yourself and just speak out. Come on, somebody's got to do something that's so amazingly great that you want to share it with everyone. I know a lot of you in here, you've been here a lot of years. You've got things in your office that you're doing that are making you so outstanding of a financial aid administrator.
Now that you said it has to
Well,
be.
I will
So-
speak if this is Betty.
Hi, Betty.
Hi. So my opinion about this is there should be, and I actually fill this role, there should be a compliance person within each financial aid office. And I actually think it could be a full-time role, but I realize the resources aren't there for that. But I think, we need to pay a lot more attention to compliance, stay up to date on what's occurring. Everything you're saying is great. Train staff, review your processes, do random checks. That's all very good advice. But I think having a dedicated compliance person is also something that offices should consider if they have the funds.
Thank you for sharing. I want to add on to that right there. And think about some of your team members that have a strong passion about maybe verification, or maybe they're Return Title IV. So let's empower them to maybe do some training for us instead of you as the directors or the people in charge. So we can help out, having our staff help us out, give a better understanding. Yes, it's going to go through to you. It's going to go through you, but you're not doing all the legwork. They're keeping us up on this. So we're having it on an agenda. Okay, Kathy, you're head of Return Title IV. What's going on? Do we need to know anything? Greg, you're in verification. Is anything going on? No. Oh, we got a little bit easier for us. The department gave us a lot of flexibility. But those things, now all of a sudden, oh, you know what? We need to have training. Is this data okay for the whole team? There's a lot going on with the Return Title IV. So those things right there, not just one person, could be a whole group. Make it a team effort. Like I said earlier in the presentation, the compliance is not just one person, the head of the director's report. It's the universities and the college report. So if everybody understands that, the collaboration of taking the ownership and the accountability, people are going to want to do a great job and want to make sure they understand these regulations. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
Well, I also wanted to say that I do agree with that in terms of compliance being sort of a campus-wide effort. And if you're not collaborating with offices outside of financial aid, you can't possibly be compliant.
So true.
Yeah. Caitlin, did I see your microphone come off? Your mute come off?
It did, but it was right after you said it's something very amazing that we're doing, and it's not that amazing, but it's just a simple, at the end of each semester, at like day 20 after the semester, if we have a student that's not registered that was previously registered, or that they dropped their status and they haven't completed exit or gotten a letter previously because they withdrew, then we just send those out. So we do that blanket at the end of each payment period to make sure that we're catching everybody.
Great. That's a great practice. Thank
This
you.
is Todd Gibson. Sorry, I'm fairly new, so I couldn't offer anything to you all. I really appreciate the content and the detail, but is there a model compliance plan out there that I could reference to learn more?
I think that NASFA has a administrative capability, NASFA U course that you can maybe look into, and that would give you a lot of what you need.
The Department of Education also does. They have an assessment on each different part, like Return Title IV verification. They have these assessments that you can start doing and building them out to make sure that you're in compliance. But look around, look in the web right there. There's multiple peoples out here. And the one thing great about this organization, you guys are willing to help others, especially your fellow coworkers and your fellow friends out here. So it's bounce things off each other. You guys do that awesome. And it's great that the communication between all of the different schools come together and help each other out. They do the mission is to help out the students. And that's all we want us to do, is to encourage, and if we find a better process to do it, maybe somebody else did it, and maybe that little bug that they said something that it triggers us to do it a different way and it makes us more efficient, that we can spend more time with the student. So that's what we all want, to make that student get their dream of becoming a nurse, becoming an engineer, becoming an accountant, you know, whatever their dream is, we want them to fulfill it. But if we're always in the weeds and we can't get there because we're too busy, we might be turning them away. So anybody else willing to share? One more before we go to our next session. What's the brave soul out there that's going to give us one more? Paul, man, you just looked away, man. I saw that. You looked away like so quick. I'm sorry, Paul, I had to.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Our
Pleasure.
contact information is here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd like to help you in any way we can. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.